Hey, what's going on everybody? Jungle Expert Ryan Flares Doyle here, and I'm extremely excited to share with you all today our guide for League's newest champion, Lillia. So, Lillia was just recently released, and already players can draw parallels to her kit being a mixed breed of Hecarim and Zoe. Don't visualize it, just roll with it. She was made specifically for the jungle, but can be taken into either solo lanes too. However, we're going to stick with her main role for jungle for this guide. Lillia was made to be a really solid power farming jungler that scales well into the mid and late game. However, her early game is left quite poor and leaves her in a tough spot of potentially getting invaded early and hard losing for the rest of the game. Also, her ganks pre-6 are just not the best. You are extremely squishy on Lillia, and by putting yourself in a position to deal damage with your Q or W, it will leave you in an awkward position to get dove or turned on and get killed in the process. Though, if you have a solid gank setup from your laners like a Set or Shen top, Alistar or Nautilus support, things like that of that nature, then you can utilize your spells to their utmost potential and start snowballing. In teamfights, she is going to want to bob and weave throughout the fights using her AoE and speed as she gets her passive to dot up the enemies and strike them with that true damage on her Q. She is best built as an AP bruiser or AP off tank as her AP ratios are just really low but has a high base damages combined with her passive. Her Q is going to allow you to literally run circles and kite around the other team, which is an extremely enjoyable, unique jungle playstyle. Her W has a massive burst if you happen to land it right in the center, while her E has so many functions, especially since it's global. And of course, you have her ultimate basically being a team-wide Zoe Sleepy Trouble bubble, except instead of having to hit people through walls, you can hit people with any of your abilities and use your R globally. The biggest takeaway here is that she's like a kawaii 2020 version of Singed, but in the jungle. Her passive is going to be a Dream-Laden Bow. All her abilities will deal 5% maxed HP damage over 3 seconds. This has no AP scaling, no level scaling unless it's versus monsters, which just helps her maintain high DPS during teamfights without the need for AP items. Her Q is Blooming Blows. It has a passive that grants you move speed whenever you hit an ability at least one enemy, and this includes monsters and minions or champions, and it stacks up to 5 times. You can only get 1 stack per ability cast even if you hit more than one enemy. It lasts 5 seconds and you lose 1 stack every second after those 5 seconds are up. The active is pretty much like old Darius Q. It's super quick, 360 spin, doing damage to everybody inside. The outer radius does extra true damage. The max range is 485 where the inner range is 225. It can be cast while moving, but it does interrupt auto attacks. And yes, it does apply her Dream-Laden Bow passive and AoE, which is her main damage pattern. Her W is Watch Out, Eep! It does a smash dash towards the location, then smashes in an AoE with the center dealing 200% more damage. It does less damage to minions, it can't go over walls or terrain, it does proc sudden impact, and it does have 500 range. However, it does lock you out of literally doing anything during its cast time, but you can buffer your Q or R to instantly come out while you wait. This ability doesn't do much damage without hitting that sweet spot, and it's very hard to land during a fight, so often you'll want to hold it until someone is crowd controlled, and it's quite clunky to land otherwise. Lillia's E is Swirl Seed. It rolls a seed with infinite range, but it cancels on the first terrain or target hit, then explodes dealing AoE damage and is slow. It's a really cool ability for long range snipes, pick attempts, or poking people from base while you buy items. It has a similar effect that Ziggs Q has, where when it's tossed up then lands it continues to roll. You can toss the Swirl Seed over initial terrain with this, but be careful in close combat as to not accidentally toss it over people. If Dream Dust is on somebody, which is her passive, then you can activate your R to make them drowsy, then fall asleep for a few seconds, then if woken up before the sleep duration expires, you get that extra magic damage. The cool thing about this one, unlike a Zoe, is that if you hit 5 people with your Q, then you can get a 5-man sleep that can't be missed like a Zoe bubble does most of the time, as Lillia R is a target global ability similar to a Karthus R. That being said, just like Karthus R, it has no max range, so if you snipe somebody out with your E Swirl Seed from across the map, then you can sleep them with the Lifting Lullaby. Moving on to the combos and jungle clear, this champion doesn't really have a lot of combos, but here are some quick tips or tricks. Practice having at least 1 or 2 spots you can use your E from base to snipe out each lane, and you never know if it might hit, so you can use it to try and impact the lane. Your E should be used to approach fights rather than be used mid-combat, as landing it will not only slow the person, but it will proc your Prance passive to allow you to gap close even easier. To more safely land your W in its sweet spot, wait for the enemy to be CC'd or use your ult first. You can flash cancel your Q and E and R, though I doubt you'll need it for your E or R one much. And it's worth noting that your W cannot be flash cancelled, nor can you move during it or really do anything. Your E will reveal people as hit when in Fog of War, which is quite useful for checking brushes. You can use your E into R combo to set up picks for your laners without even having to commit for actual ganks if it has land, so this can also be a tool for starting fights mid-game, as the sleep plus drowsy effect even at rank 1 is 3.5 seconds of crowd control. And during fights, it's more about maintaining your sweet spot on your Q than it is to weave in too many auto attacks. And similar to Singed, a lot of the time the correct move is just to run around maintaining that sweet spot, which when trying to gauge it, it is slightly higher than your auto attack range. So let's get into how to clear the jungle. She has low base armor, one of, if not the lowest in the game, but decent range and high movement speed due to her Q passive. This means you must kite camps. Her clear later into the game is quite quick. With her AoE damage similar to champs like Hecarim or Fiddlesticks, she can do multiple camps at once like Blue and Gromp or Red and Raptors, which is slightly harder. On her first clear, she is very bad at killing Gromp and Red, as she can't kite those camps effectively and they are single target. Keep this in mind when choosing to do them, especially Gromp, who is really going to chunk you down. So be sure to ask for and ping for a leash at the start of the game. Remember to try and finish off camps with your Q or the combined dot of Q passive plus talisman, as they will allow you to maintain your prance stacks as you farm, which is both helpful for kiting but also when joining in on river fights or escaping from invades. This will also help you save a couple of seconds on your clear if timed properly. So your ideal pathing will likely be red into Krugs with Smite, Raptors, Wolves, Blue into a Scuttle Crab, where you'll want to use Smite if the enemy jungler is going to contest that side, or get the free Scuttle, save your Smite and look for a gank, or go back into Gromp and Smite that and recall. Moving on to your build, the starting items are going to be Talisman and Refillable Potion, where your boots are going to want Mercury Treads as they're her best option whenever you need them, as staying mobile is the key to this champion. Although if you're snowballing, you can build the Sorcerer's Shoes, and if you're against full AD comps, you're going to want a Ninja Tabby. But if you don't need tank boots, Swifties do incredibly well on her, as they synergize well with her play pattern of prancing around fights. Her core items are going to be Runic Echoes and Blue Smite, though versus divers or assassins, Red Smite is a good option instead. Liandry's Torment is your other core item and your best damage item due to its synergy with your passive and playstyle. For your full build or potential situational items, you're going to want to take Runic Echoes Blue Smite, Mercury Treads, Liandry's, a Dead Man's Plate, a Spirit Visage, and a Frozen Heart. But to be honest, anything after the Liandry's is pretty situational. Although Deadman's has the highest win rate third item, as it allows Lillia to be tanky enough to have enough movement speed to get as many Q sweet spots as possible, and you have Frozen Heart, which gives her maxed out CDR if you run Scaling CDR rune, and the passive actually increases Liandry's damage output, making it a very strong item on her. Some other options you can go are Rylai's, a Morello, Adaptive Helm, Void Staff, Abyssal Mask, Mage Eyes, Randuin's, Warmogs, and Zanya's. Their AP ratio is kind of being bad. She tends to not want any more AP items after her first two and prefers CDR, HP, and resistances to stay and kite out fights longer. Also, since she isn't super good with Runic Echoes, some people are testing out skipping the completed jungle item in favor of a Rod of Ages or going straight into a Liandry's, but for now I just stick with the completed jungle item. As for your runes, you'll want Dark Harvest, Cheap Shot, Eyeball Collection, and Ravenous Hunter, where Free Boots and Cosmic Insight is the highest win rate option at the moment for secondary, but Nimbus Cloak and Celerity has amazing synergy with her kit and is not far behind in terms of win rate. So be sure to test out both, but if I had to put my money on it, Nimbus and Celerity are my choice. For your stat charge, you can either go CDR or Adaptive, it's up to you, followed by another Adaptive and Armor. As for leveling your abilities, max Q, W, and E, and at level 3 put another point into your Q for a better clear, unless you know for sure you want to gank, then level E instead. Your power spikes are going to be at level 6, 9, 13, and level 16, as she gets a lot of her ganking power at level 6. She gets much stronger once her main sources of damage, her Q and W, are maxed out. And having her rank 3 ult is a full 3 seconds of sleep CC, which is massive when it comes to team fights. Your item power spikes are going to be your Runic Echoes completion, as it is a good power spike and allows you to clear jungle much faster and more impactful in ganks and maintain your mana. Liandry's is going to be your best damage spike, and when you enter your team fights, your first tanky item, most commonly a Dead Man's Plate or a Spirit Visage, and is very strong. After that, it doesn't really matter much, as everything else is just situational. For your early game, do your standard clear that was mentioned previously, with starting red into Krugs with Smite into Raptors, Wolves, Blue, and Scuttle plus Smite. During the process, remember to kite the camps as much as possible to keep your HP up, as you are very vulnerable to being invaded in the early game. Once you finish the first scuttle, you'll look at the map to see if you have any free ganks. Lillia ganks pre-6 aren't too amazing like I said before, if your laner has no CC setup, because if they don't, it's very difficult to land your W to secure the kill. That means Lillia players are going to look for more reactive ganks early on and look to power farm until 6, similar to some other AP non-invade junglers like Evelynn, as they both farm quite quickly. Once you hit 6 though, it's game time. Now when you can start making those big plays, whether it's long range E-snipes to set up kills with your R from a distance, or walking up to skirmishes and putting down some nice AoE CC and damage, this is where you'll want to start to snowball on this champion, especially after Runic Echoes is complete as one of your main spikes. You should also be creative with your E usage. When approaching ganks, you can lob your E over walls and have it roll into minions and try to land that splash damage onto enemy champions. Similar to Fiddlesticks with how much damage you do and how potent your R is, every time you ult, you should likely score a kill, so play more towards this play pattern. Moving on to teamfighting, and teamfighting on her is pretty simple. She is an AoE teamfight champion with low range but fast movement speed once her prance is fully stacked. So initially all you want to do is spam Q on CD in the sweet spot versus the enemy tanks, as well as burn your E and W on a CC target or somebody who can't currently dodge them. Once your Prance passive is at 5 stacks, you'll be able to push forward into the fight and start to not only kite the enemy front line if needed, but also push past them to threaten the enemy backline with your true damage Qs. Just start dancing around the fight similar to a Singed, constantly threatening to push past the front line to hit an enemy carry with your Q or E, while also still doing damage to enemy front line. Once you land an ability on an enemy carry, immediately use your R. Now that they are asleep, you can wait for your team to gather around them to all one-shot them, or you can do it yourself by sprinting to them and smashing them with a sweet spot W into a Q combo. This is your basic play pattern during team fights, and you can also make a huge hero play when the enemy team is bunched up by Q flashing into the enemy team, following it up by a 5-man R sleep as a way to engage or destroy a fight. From the jungle, she does best with crowd control AD champions, especially those with executes or that are also tanky are great, as the difference in damage type and setup to land her spells allows for some pretty nasty combos. For top lane, Urgot, Set, Garen, and Singed work best with her, whereas in mid it's Zed, Nocturne, and Talon. Bot lane it's Caitlyn, Ashe, and Jhin. With support it's Alistar, Blitzcrank, Taric, Galio, Nautilus, and Leona. And a very special mention to Soraka and Yuumi, as Lillia with Spear Visage and a Soraka Yuumi healing her, she can kite out and kill an entire team by herself. Next up, we'll go ahead and show you how to counter Lillia, and with such low base armor and limited dueling abilities due to her lack of crowd control or dashes early on, she can struggle versus early invade style junglers with mobility that are hard to kite, like Kha'Zix or Kayn, and she struggles versus Vi as she cannot kite out the R skill gap button. In general, she will struggle versus long range champions with kiting ability like Ashe for example, as she does better versus mid or low range champs she can just run down. From the jungle though, this means that she will struggle against a champion like Karthus, who will outrange her and outfarm her, who can simply put down a wall of pain and walk away before she can even get her passive stacks up to dance around them. As for some of my final thoughts about Lillia, I sincerely believe she's a strong champion with a unique playstyle that players will need some time with her to learn her playstyle and find that groove. She currently has a very low win rate in jungle, mid, and top currently due to the suboptimal itemization, which is understandable on such a new champion. She does have potential to be a good solo laner with pro players like Damonte who are playing her and are doing very well in the mid lane, playing her like the AP Nuno playstyle that sprung up. And as for a TLDR, for Lillia, she has a very poor early game but skills better in the mid and late game. She's a teamfighting AoE champion. She builds AP off tank, not full AP, as the AP ratios are low but the base damage is high combined with her passive. Her primary role is jungle, but can be played mid or top, with a passive that is a % max HP damage over time. Her Q gives you movement speed when you land an ability with a 360-degree swipe that does damage, where W is a mini dash that does huge damage on the sweet spot. Her E is a rolling bomb with infinite range, exploding on first contact with terrain or minions or a champion, dealing AoE damage. Her ultimate is an AoE sleep on anybody who's been hit by a Lillia ability. For your jungle clear, you want to do red, Krugs plus smite, Raptors, Wolves, blue, and Scuttle plus smite. For combos, you can use your R to put somebody to sleep, then you can use your W to hit the sweet spot and Q right after. When fighting, positioning for a sweet spot Qs is better than getting autos off, and save your W when you are sure you can hit the sweet spot, like when they are CC'd, as it's too hard to land otherwise. The build is Runic Echoes, Blue Smite, Liandry's, Deadman's, then a bunch of situational items like Frozen Heart, Morello's, Spirit Visage, etc. She doesn't need any more damage items after Liandry's and prefers CDR, HP, and resistances, though if you can snowball, you can build more AP to carry if you want to. For your runes, you're going to want Dark Harvest with Inspiration Secondary or Sorcery for Nimbus and Celerity, where your power spikes are going to be at level 6 and then 9, 13, and 16. Your item power spikes are going to be your Runic Echoes, Liandry's, and your first tank item, and then every tank item after that, where you're going to be maxing your Q, W, and E. Your early game you want to play for your level 6 power spike, then go nuts on every ult, especially with Runic Echoes complete, similar to a Fiddle or Evelynn in a sense rather than Elise. When teamfighting, you'll stack up your passive, then dance around the fight looking to snipe out the backline with an ability so you can ult in one combo them. And you can Q-Flash 5-man R for a hero play. Lillia does best with AD laners or ones with crowd control, and is weak to early invades from AD champs like Kha'Zix, Olaf, Graves, and Kayn, and also struggles versus longer range kite champions like Karthus or Ashe. And that's all I got for you all for this video, ladies and gents. I really hope you learned something from this video and can use it in your own ranked games to climb. As always, be sure to subscribe to the Mobalytics YouTube channel for more informational content like this, and head over to mobalytics.gg. I've been your host, Ryan Flares Doyle, and as always, have a wonderful rest of your day. Be safe out there, remember that you matter, and good luck out on the Rift Summoner.